Hello, 大家好，欢迎回到外媒看中国，我是安博然。Hey you guys, welcome back to Reports on China. I'm Andy. Now, most of us already know that ASPI, or the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, produces reports about China that are based on falsities, conspiracy theories, disinformation, and outright lies. But we don't often get a black and white, crystal clear example of their tactics in action. Today, I'm excited to present you with indisputable evidence that key members of ASPI and their friends in the Australian media comfortably and confidently engage in lies and fabricate disinformation in order to coax the Australian public into believing that China is a threat, also that their main funders, the military-industrial complex, can make bucket loads of cash through defence contracts and ultimately war with China. Let's get reporting. I've reported many times on this channel about how lie-ridden and outright false ASPI's reports on China are, and I'll link some of those videos below this one in case you haven't seen them yet. Today though, I have clear evidence that key members of ASPI are not only comfortable blatantly lying to the Australian public, they're also so cocky about how dumb they think you are that they're happy to lie point blank, all the while knowing there is evidence out there to disprove everything they're saying. So why are they so cocky? Well, because their friends in the Australian media prop them up and even go along with the lies, despite knowing full well that ASPI, a supposedly independent Australian think tank, is funded with cold, hard cash from people who profit directly from war, including BAE Systems, the largest defence contractor in Europe, Raytheon, one of the largest defence manufacturers in the world, and Lockheed Martin, who describe themselves as an arms and defence corporation with worldwide interests. Now, with those kind of backers in mind, do you think ASPI's core goal is to promote friendship, understanding and peace in the world? Why would those who profit from war and geopolitical tension want to fund ASPI? Well, the answer is clear. ASPI exists purely to manufacture tension and fear in Australia and around the world, so that ordinary people like you will believe wholeheartedly that China is a massive threat to world peace and security, ultimately lining the pockets of the arms dealers who pay their bills. One of the core writers of one of ASPI's most damaging reports is Vicky Xu. Her Uyghurs for Sale report basically manufactured the idea that China's government are using the Uyghur people as slave labour, and ended up scaring a bunch of multinational companies into no longer hiring Uyghur people, negatively affecting their livelihoods. Recently, ASPI held a public event at Melbourne's La Trobe University, where a man called Robert Barwick, who happens to be from the Australian Citizens Party, turned up to question Vicky about whether or not she knows exactly how many Uyghurs had their livelihoods affected by her report. But before I tell you what really happened and show you the video evidence proving ASPI and Australia's media are colluding to mislead the public, let's first read an article by Tom Cancetti of SBS News. It's dramatically titled, "Harassing, Targeting and Intimidating. Is Australia a safe place for critics of the Chinese government?" The article says, researcher and journalist Vicky Xu withdrew from appearing in the media for the past year and a half due to what she calls harassing, targeting and intimidating by the Chinese government and its fanatic supporters. Last week, Ms. Xu returned, making an appearance at La Trobe University in Melbourne, where she was to give a talk on China's human rights records. Now, instantly, as a member of the public without further knowledge, you're going to get the idea in your head that Australia is not safe for anyone criticising the Chinese government. But let's keep reading. Once Ms. Xu began her talk last Wednesday, a man in the audience at La Trobe University repeatedly questioned the legitimacy of her work. Ms. Xu recognised the man from a similar encounter at Melbourne Airport, where she claims he ambushed her, questioning her journalism on alleged human rights abuses in China. It was deeply unsettling, Ms. Xu told SBS News. She goes on, "It seems to me that their aim is to make institutions and universities fear such disruption and to make them too scared to invite journalists, researchers, analysts like myself," she said. "Because I was participating at the event, La Trobe University had to hire security specifically for this event, especially in light of what happened to Rushdie." Now, in case you don't know, she's talking about Salman Rushdie, who was stabbed multiple times at an event in New York recently. Basically, what Vicky's doing here is eliciting scary images in the eyes of the public, so that they'll tie that level of danger to the scary incident that happened to Vicky at La Trobe University. Let's find out more about that terrifying event. Now, another member of ASPI steps in to back up the nightmarish situation for Australian readers. Co-author of Uyghurs for Sale and senior ASPI fellow James Leibold was chairing the event and had to call security to ask the man to leave, the article says. Next, they quote James. He became quite agitated and stood up and started to walk towards her in a pretty confronting way, and myself and Sophie McNeil from Human Rights Watch had to intervene, Mr. Leibold said. Wow, that sounds really scary. Remember that, okay? I'll read it again. He became quite agitated and stood up and started to walk towards her in a pretty confronting way. Then he claims himself and a woman named Sophie had to step in to intervene. James added, I know she doesn't feel safe, and that shouldn't happen in an open democracy like Australia. Next up is Sophie from Human Rights Watch with her heart-wrenching description of what is already obviously a pretty traumatic event. She told SBS News that Australia should be a safe place for dissidents, critics and journalists to speak about human rights without feeling intimidated. We've increasingly seen in the last few years real concerted efforts to attack anyone who publicly criticises the Chinese Communist Party in Australia, Ms. McNeil said. Okay, I think the SBS News story has already painted a pretty horrific picture, don't you think? It sounds like a deranged man turned up at the event, rushed towards the front of the stage and had to be held back by security. But interestingly enough, I actually have a full video of the situation and the entire exchange. So after the representation that was painted by ASPI, Human Rights Watch and SBS News, let's take a look. The video is about 3 minutes long and I'll play it in its entirety.
The Citizens Party. I've got two questions for Vicky. The first is on the effectiveness of your Uyghurs for Sale report. Can you identify manufacturing companies that have stopped using Uyghur labour because of your report?
Maybe the speaker goes up to work.
First of all, I would like to point out that last year during one of my trips to Melbourne to record Q&A, I ran into Robert at the airport and in my opinion, I was ambushed and he misrepresented our exchange on Twitter. And he accused me of wanting war with China. So I do not consider Robert to be here in good faith, and I refuse to answer his questions.
Oh, give me a break. I did not read the tweet. Excuse me. Read the tweet. I did not accuse you of that. I said I don't want war with China. I just quoted you saying I'm at war with China. I did not quote you saying anything else. You can see the tweet online.
Anyway, let's you ask
No. I asked the question. I'd like an answer. Instead, I got attacked.
Sorry, please.
This is censorship. You speak.
It is censorship. For those who are interested, I've brought along 10 copies of Jacqueline James' legal analysis of the Uyghurs for Sale report. And if you're interested, she debunks it completely and thoroughly.
You're an apologist for genocide. Get out.
And you're censoring.
I am not an apologist for genocide. This is a joke. Raising the living standards of people is not...
Sit down.
Excuse me?
Sit down.
No, I'm not going to sit down. I've been attacked.
Excuse me.
Anyway, please either sit down or we'll have to leave the room.
You had your moment, and Jack had her moment on Monday in Canberra, and he's been heard, and we'd like to have
Well, I'd like... No. We'd like a response. You are troublemaking in international affairs.
I'll point out that
Everything-
Robert, you have potentially stalked me before, and
I'd like to ask you to leave, please.
For the record, I was at the taxi rank next to Vicky at Melbourne Airport. I didn't stalk her, I didn't follow her, I recognised her and I asked her a question.
and I'm running to you again here today with 10
I have
puppies.
come to ask you this question, Vicky.
We have other questions.
That's not stalking, this is a public event.
And I refuse to answer your questions because I do not consider them to be of good faith.
Please leave.
And I do not
Would,
actually.
Please,
before I leave, would anyone like a copy of this report?
Please leave the room.
Hold your hand up if you'd like a copy of this report.
We read it. It's nonsense.
We'll pick it up when we want it.
Don't be a drama queen.
Oh, don't be a drama queen. There's...
Okay, welcome back. So what did you guys think? Obviously, the description of the exchange and the reportage by SBS News is completely and utterly different from reality. Robert Barwick asked Vicky a legitimate question, which she came up with some excuse about good faith to ignore. As for reports that he started walking towards her in a pretty confronting way, I'm sure that you and any other reasonable person would not describe it in that way at all. So why are ASPI so comfortable lying even when they know that there's clear evidence that goes against their version of events? Well, because this is what they're trained to do basically, this is what they're good at. And they know full well that the media have their back, as evidenced here by this report by SBS News' Tom Sanetti, who's evidently either a bad journalist or a liar, because there are only two options. One, he didn't bother to seek out the other side of the story, he doesn't know the video exists. Or two, he has seen the video and lied to you anyway. I tried to ask Vicky for a comment, but she's already blocked me on Twitter. Sophie, that woman from Human Rights Watch who lied to SBS News about the situation, also blocked me after I challenged her version of events on Twitter. So I think it's pretty clear, you guys, that ASPI, as well as their friends in the media, are out to fool you, to make you believe that China is a threat to world peace and security, just so that you'll support your government buying billions of dollars worth of arms to protect yourself from a threat that you've seen as literally based off misinformation, exaggeration, and outright lies. ASPI, its writers, and its enablers are nothing but warmongers. Spread the word, you guys. I'll see you next time.